Hi y'all, welcome back to the channel. If you are new, I invite you to subscribe. It means the world, specifically when it comes to videos like the one that we're doing today. It's very important that this information gets shared and disseminated, so please feel free to do so. Share on your social media channels, whatever. If you are a returning visitor to the channel, same thing holds true. It really does mean the world that you are either investing or wasting your time with me. But again, specifically, it means the world if you're doing so with videos like the one that we're doing today. So if you are new to the channel, you are here for one of three reasons. One, Disney vlogs you did not ask for. Two, the most epic film and television reviews the world has ever known, part and parcel thanks to Chad, who is my partner in crime in all things film and TV reviews. And thirdly, and most importantly, women's issues. More specifically, issues surrounding menstrual equity, access to menstrual hygiene. I have been part of an organization, a nonprofit called #HappyPeriod since 2015, which, along with many other nonprofits around the country and the globe, are working to provide menstrual hygiene products to the homeless and underserved menstruators in a given community. I happen to co-found the Bay Area chapter. So if you want to find out more or do like a deeper dive into Happy Period specifically, I will link both my women's issue playlist and the Happy Period playlist in the iCard so you have easy access to them. So you can find out more about the mission and why I do these menstrual equity videos, and more importantly, how you can get involved, whether it's with us, another organization, or just doing your own thing. So again, thank you for watching. This is probably going to be a long one. I mean, they're all long ones. I don't know who I'm kidding, but cheers. So, this particular video was inspired by a couple of articles that popped up on my radar over the past 2 weeks while I had been traveling, none of which are new news. These are topics of discussion that have been making it into mainstream media over the past year or two. But they're picking up speed. There's more momentum behind this conversation. A, because access to menstrual hygiene for the underserved is being talked about more. B, just women's issues around the taboo of menstruation. That topic is being discussed more on a mainstream level. And third, and this will all tie together when I tell you what we're actually going to talk about, which I promise I'll get to, is the environmental impact of the waste associated with your menstrual hygiene products. So because we have, young men and women across the country and the world, like Greta Thunberg, who are lobbying, working, campaigning to save us from ourselves against the inevitable impacts of climate change. And we have movements like Extinction Rebellion that are, of course, making waves and making headway in bringing awareness to the inevitable demise of the planet if we don't accept the facts of science. Yeah, the combination of these two issues made its way into three articles that I happened across. One from The Guardian UK, one from Forbes, and one from Nat Geo. So, I'm going to kind of start this conversation off by giving you the statistics to lay the groundwork for what an average menstrual life cycle looks like for an individual, how much we go through on average, and kind of get into the history of, the use of plastics in menstrual hygiene products and where we are now, and hopefully what we can try and do about it. So, with these three articles, one being, focusing on U.S. statistics and the other focusing more so on United Kingdom statistics, I'm going to kind of bounce between the two, so I'll let you know when I'm referencing which. But I want to kind of hit the stats first, because who doesn't love a tight statistic, right? So, here we go. I'm doing vodka because the world's ending, plastics everywhere, so why not, right? Cheers. So 2 things that struck me right out of the gate when I was researching what I wanted to talk about in this video. The first thing is, and this is there, you can find a lot of articles on this as well. The ones I'm mentioning, I'll make sure to link in the description box, but there's lots of stuff you can do your own due diligence on when it comes to the regulations around menstrual hygiene products from the FDA. So what I knew but really didn't hit home until I was doing the research for this, and I apologize for the banging, it's very windy out and it's making my doors bang, is that the manufacturers of menstrual hygiene products, due to whatever laws, FDA, regulations, whatever, are not required to list the ingredients or components, if you will, of what's inside of their products. I just spit, I'm so sorry. You're gonna get that in high def 4K, you're welcome. I bring you the best quality. So I already knew that, which is terrifying enough, but what took me aback is because these articles are focusing on the environmental impacts of the waste associated with menstrual hygiene products, was to learn that because it is deemed medical or clinical waste, the waste itself is not tracked like other things we throw away or recycle are. So the folks that are putting these statistics together are the ones that are in fields of, in fields of research or in academia, or who are, lobbyists or campaigns or trying to affect policy, that are doing the research and coming up with the best, the most accurate numbers that we can, given the fact that this is not tracked officially at the highest levels. So let's get into the statistics. And this is from the National Geographic article. Excuse me. As of 2018, you're going to want to take notes. As of 2018, 5.8 billion, with a B, tampons were purchased in the United States alone. 5.8 billion tampons, just tampons, purchased in the US alone. Now, let's take a step back and look at what the life cycle of a menstruator looks like. So the average menstruator, whether you're a woman or a trans man, if you are bleeding, you are on average bleeding for 40 years of your life, or you're menstruating. Let me take that from the top. You're menstruating for 40 years out of your life on average. Now, that breaks down to 2,400 technical difficulties. So, I had to reset my camera, and I'm filming for 2. So if my eyes are like way all over the place, you'll just have to move on with your life. So the average person who menstruates, whether they're female, whether they're a trans male, whatever the situation is, you're menstruating on average for 40 years out of your life, which equates to 2,400 days. That is equivalent to 6.5 years of actual bleeding. So out of the 40 years on average that I might be menstruating, 6.5 years of my life is spent with literal blood coming out of my vagina. Now, let's look at that original statistic again. 5.8 billion tampons, just tampons, purchased in the United States alone last year. We're going to flip over to the Forbes article and their stat, which comes from the United Kingdom. And they found that 3.4 million tampons and 2.4 million pads are flushed down the toilet every single day in the United Kingdom. 3.4 million tampons and 2.4 million pads in the United Kingdom alone are flushed down the toilet every single day. I mean, that's a lot to process. Here's another thing you may want to fasten your seatbelts for. In that 40-year lifespan of menstruating, the average menstruator, the individual, Melissa right here, will go through anywhere between 250 and 300 pounds of menstrual trash or waste in that lifetime. these numbers just like are really hard to process. In that 40 years that you're on average menstruating, you will go through between 5 and 15,000 pads and or tampons. 5 and 15,000 pads and or tampons in the life cycle of you being a menstruator, equaling 250 to 350 pounds of waste per day in the United Kingdom. I mean, that's insane. That's insane. But you're not ready for what I'm about to tell you, clearly. I can tell that you're not. Right now, on planet Earth, I don't know if this statistic is accounting for trans men, but right now, there are 1.9 billion with a B, women who are menstruating, okay? There are 1.9 billion people on the earth at any given time right now who are bleeding, contributing to that 300 pounds of waste per day being flushed down the toilet, or that 5 to 15,000 pads, tampons that are going to be purchased over the course of a lifetime. I mean, the waste adds up just from pads and tampons and liners so quickly. It's astonishing. So I just wanted to hit you with a couple of just quick stats before we get into kind of the history of the introduction of plastics into these products. But I do want to say this. In the Forbes article, they mentioned that the amount of plastics, microplastics, that are found in pads and tampons equals the amount of plastic that makes up 4 plastic grocery bags. Let's one more time for the people in the back. The average amount of plastics found in menstrual hygiene products is equivalent to 4 plastic grocery bags. That is either something you're sitting on or something that is literally inside of you. And what was the first thing that we learned as girls when we were learning about our menses, getting our menses, whatever, sex ed, puberty, or just real life experience? Like, what was the big thing? The big fucking fear? Toxic shock syndrome. I've never met anyone that's had toxic shock syndrome, and you can get it from other things, obviously, besides pads and tampons. But that was the reason why I didn't use tampons for years, is because I was terrified I was going to put something inside of me and my body was going to reject it. And I'm fortunate enough that hasn't happened to me. But the older I get and the more that I've learned, the more real that fear actually should be. Sorry, it's very windy in here. Things are falling over. When you really do the due diligence and look at what chemicals, pesticides, deodorizers, fragrances, and dyes are in the average pad and tampon, and that's going into the most absorbent, sensitive tissue in your body, it's fucking frightening. So, vodka. So let's get into a little history here. I told you this was going to be a long one, but it'll be worth it, I think. I think so. So we're going back to the National Geographic article here. So the tampon was invented by a man, a gentleman named Earl Cleveland, in 1933. Now, Earl either had the forethought or the lack of access to technology, but his original tampon design and patent, which you can find if you just do a very simple Google image search for either Earl Cleveland tampon or original tampon patent, had a cardboard applicator and a very simple, essentially 100% cotton tampon with, the string. Very simple, as we know. It was all fine and good, all plant-based. We were okay. And then in 1973, we saw the first introduction of mass manufactured tampons with plastics. Not only the plastic applicator, which had shifted from the cardboard one, which that would be unpleasant, but still. and microplastics being introduced to the tampon and pad itself. One thing I forgot to mention about that first statistic of the 5.8 billion tampons purchased in the U.S. as of 2018, we account for a third of the global consumption of tampons. So, I mean, that opens up to a larger conversation of, like, lack of access in other countries, homelessness and all the rest of it, but we obviously know the United States is a very wasteful country, and the fact that we account for a third of worldwide global tampon purchases is pretty upsetting. Where's my pen? Okay, so Earl Cleveland, 1933, invented the tampon. Thank you, Earl. Blessings upon your family. In 1921, the Kotex Corporation introduces a material that they call Cellucotton, C-E-L-L-U cotton, all one word, Cellucotton, which is what they were making their pads from. All plant-based, no one's getting hurt, peace and love, hug the trees. So Kotex was, coming through with pads for us, from Jump Street prior to Mr. Cleveland introducing the tampon in 33. But what we started to see happen in the 60s is this idea of disposability. What the article talks about is the fact that pads had been, fine and well for a long time, for centuries, in fact, for millennia probably. Women were fashioning fabrics, in some form or fashion, not to be redundant here, into reusable pads, as it were. And then Kotex, of course, came along and introduced the single-use pad. Prior to that, there were single-use pads, but if you look at the patents and the pictures for, like, Victorian-era pads, like, it was basically like a belt that you wore, and the pad was attached to the belt. It was like a big diaper attached to a belt. It was a hot mess. So, thank you, Kotex, for coming in hot with, the pad kind of as we know it. But this idea of disposability really started to take hold in the mid-century. The marketing aspect really started to take hold as well during the mid-century. So after World War II, you see women re-entering the workplace, or in some cases entering it for the first time. So there was a lot of marketing towards women's menstrual hygiene products as needing to be discreet, as needing to be demure and sophisticated and all the rest of it. One of the women in the National Geographic article who's doing a lot of the research on this is quoted as saying, "You can't let your body slow you down." And that was kind of the impetus for the initial marketing of menstrual hygiene products to women is, you're now competing with men, you have a quote-unquote seat at the table, stay with me, not, equally, but, they're entering the workforce, so God forbid you let your biological process slow you down. You can't. You simply can't, right? And so, marketing and advertising is preying on that. What we see at the end of World War II is that the sales of menstrual hygiene products, pads and tampons, quintupled. They quintupled. So in addition to that, in the 1960s, we're seeing a lot of research and, burgeoning research of plastics and burgeoning technology and manufacturing around plastics and various uses. And there was this explosion of, like, plastic is the next best thing, and they were looking for another market for it. Lo and behold, women have holes, so let's figure out how to put some plastic in there. So there you go. In 1970, somebody invented the wings. So thank you for that, I guess. I don't know. Two women who are cited in this article that are providing a lot of these statistics. One is Lara Friedenfeld, who's written a book called The Modern Period, and the other is Elizabeth Arveda Kissling, who wrote a book called Capitalizing on the Curse, The Business of Menstruation. And she very specifically in this article talks about how the taboo and shame and secrecy around menstruating resulted in the modern day marketing that we still are suffering from today when it comes to menstrual hygiene products. She also points out that during this time in the mid-century, there was very much, a taboo around what, God forbid, would happen if you touched your vagina whilst trying to insert a tampon or put a pad in your underwear. God forbid you touched your vagina whilst doing so. There was a taboo where it was just, you just don't do that. You don't need to go and touch your body, your bits, your business, your pussy, whatever. No, you just want to plug it up and be done with it, right? So that's entering into the psyche through marketing and advertising and being reinforced in every other in every other aspect of life back then. Where do we want to go now? So, hang on, stay with me now. Just making sure I'm not going out of order. What we've learned is that the average life cycle of a single-use plastic, whether it's the microplastics in a pad, tampon, plastic bottle, plastic bag, is 500 years. So it's going to take, at the earliest, at best case scenario, 500 years for any plastic to biodegrade. And Kissling, the woman I just mentioned, also points out, and she is quoted as saying, "We are still selling shame with products." And this is true. Look at modern day ads. What is the color of the liquid that they use to show you how absorbent something is? It's blue. I'm not bleeding Windex last time I checked, and neither are you. There are some ads, some companies that are starting to use red, which is fantastic. But the fact that it's, almost 2020, the year of our Lord, and we can't handle the color red, and just the general idea, even I've talked about this in another video, as women, we still have a hard time with the taboo. We still have a hard time processing the fact that we bleed out of our vaginas once a month. We don't even really want to look at it. We really don't even know our bodies. We really don't even know how to have the conversations. So yeah, it's a whole thing. And this really kind of took my breath away, this next thing. Well, two things. You look at a tampon, a modern day tampon. I'm not even going to go into pads because I don't have all of the facts, but you look at a modern day tampon, plastic applicator. There's plastic inside of the actual rope string to keep it sturdy. And of course there's microplastics inside of the cotton tampon itself to help with absorbency, sometimes, with fragrances. There's fucking plastic in there. I say all of that to say, there are just so many things that you don't think about, myself included, until you think about them. We don't know what we don't know. And although, we may, realize somewhere that, okay, yeah, this shit's full of plastic, until it's, really named and you really say it out loud and you really, look at some numbers and actually, open your tampon, crack it open and look at the inside of it, you can tell that's not organic cotton. It just isn't. That's not how cotton looks, and that's not how cotton feels. It just goes back to the conversation of we don't know because we're not taking the time to know ourselves and the things that we are putting inside of ourselves. But this next thing really took me aback. This is still from the National Geographic article. They were talking about how in the 60s, Johnson & Johnson used to place ads in ladies' magazines that had little cut-out kind of coupons. And they would take them, women would cut them out and take them to a pharmacy and go to the pharmacist and hand it to the pharmacist in a very indiscreet way. and they would in return get an unmarked box full of pads or tampons. Like, that's how taboo and that's how much shame was around purchasing your own menstrual hygiene products, that you would take a coupon that was very nondescript, go to the pharmacist, hand it over, and you'd get an unmarked box of stuff to put in your box. I mean, the rabbit hole is deep. It's deep. Here's another interesting thing in the National Geographic article, or excuse me, this is now in the Forbes article, where when we introduced reusable menstrual hygiene products very heavily into use in the mid-century, you know, we have one component going on, like this one element of like a woman is demure and she needs to be discreet, and she can't let her body get in the way of like competing with the man and being in the workforce. She can't let your body slow you down. So you have the plastic elements in the tampon itself and the plastic applicator. Now we get into the plastic wrapping of individual pads and individual tampons, such that you can be in the workplace and not have to take a huge box to the bathroom. You can very demurely and discreetly take a single-use tampon that's wrapped, and nobody knows what that is, to the bathroom. So you have that going on, right? The introduction of plastic, individually wrapped menstrual hygiene products. So waste on top of waste on top of waste. The other thing that is mentioned in this Forbes article, which is really, really interesting, and I had not really thought about this, because it's, again, one of those things where you don't really think about it. But this idea that, when you put a pad on and you just stick it to your underwear, there's nothing going inside of you. You don't have to touch your vagina at all to do this, right? Like, sticks to your underwear, boom, you're out, okay? And even with a tampon, because there was so much shame and taboo around, God forbid I touch my own genitals while inserting a tampon. If you think about all of the times you've inserted a tampon over your life, you almost really aren't touching yourself. I mean, barely. You're touching maybe your outer labia, as you kind of hold your fingers in place to insert the applicator. There's still, this article points out that there's still a barrier, like a distance between your menstrual hygiene process and physically knowing your body, because you really aren't doing anything to really familiarize yourself with your body, how it feels, how it works, etc. And that just really took me aback. She's even quoted as saying, the person in the Forbes article, that reusables make you get familiar with your body. So reusables, things like cups, things like Flex, things that you really kind of have to learn how to put inside of you, force you to get up close and personal with your pussy and your anatomy, and I think that's great. Let's see, what else did we not cover? So segueing into reusables, right? So that's kind of the history that the National Geographic and Forbes article lay down as far as how menstrual hygiene products came to be, how they were marketed, etc., and so forth. And of course, this is just scratching the surface, but now that we kind of have, that layer down, reusables are obviously what a lot of women, domestically, internationally, first worlds, second worlds, third worlds, and even in the homeless community are trying to veer towards, whether it's a reusable washable cloth pad, which works much the same way as a reusable cloth diaper, right? Like, you have to do the heavy lifting, you have to wash it, you have to have a bunch of them, you have to keep them clean, but there's no waste involved, aside of course from the soap and all of that, but there's no actual immediate waste from the product itself. Cups again are reusables. They take getting used to. You have to learn how to insert them. You have to learn how to keep them clean and hygienic, which is why, and I've talked about this in happy period videos, they're not necessarily ideal if you're going to be donating on the street or directly to homeless people, because they may not have access to a bathroom where they can keep these things clean and hygienic on a regular basis. But barring that conversation, for the average user who has access to plumbing and running water, a cup, silicone cup, will on average last 10 years. 10 years. One cup. Think of how much waste is eliminated by women just switching to cups. 5,000 to 15,000 pads, tampons bought over the course of a lifetime, 250 to 300 pounds of waste per day flushed down the toilet, going into our oceans, and then therefore back into our food supply. I mean, don't get me going. There are 199 brands of cups in 99 countries right now. There are cups of all shapes and sizes, different, iterations, different sizes, whatever. So you may have to play around with, what works best for your body and do a little trial and error moment, just like you would with a tampon brand or a pad brand. But there's enough to choose from. There's enough manufacturers out there. And the average cup costs about $15 to $20. Some of the more expensive ones could be like up to $30. But considering you get yourself a couple of those and they'll last you 10 years each, compare that to your average tampon, panty liner, pad budget. And I think that economically you'll see that there's a whole conversation to be had there, right? Like the amount of money that you can save by going reusable. So you have reusable pads, right? Cloth pads. You have cups. You of course have, and here's an interesting stat about cups. The plastics and silicones used in to make cups versus the amount that are used to make pads and tampons. So the Guardian article cites that the average cup uses 0.4% of the amount of plastic found in a pad and 6% of the amount of plastic used in a tampon. Okay, let's one more time for the people in the back. A cup uses 0.4% the amount of plastic found in a pad and 6% of the plastic found in a tampon. You're saving the earth right then and there, okay? Let's mark that one off. What else here? What else do I have here for you? Cups last up to 10 years. So the thing about one of the things that I hadn't gone into, and you can really do your due diligence on this because every brand will vary, but what is actually in a pad and tampon chemically and plastics wise that's harmful to you. So aside from the microplastics, which are used to strengthen the material of the cotton and also to help with absorbency, the thing that helps with absorbency is something called, oh my god, I didn't write that one down. Okay, but there is a chemical in there that is a plastic that helps with absorbency. I did not write it down, but you can Google it. But what's also in your average pad and tampon, in addition to many other things, but here's the two main things. The first one is what's called dioxins. What are called dioxins, which are a byproduct of bleaching the cotton. Dioxins are a carcinogen. They are known by the FDA to be one of the most dangerous chemicals on the planet. They are in every pad and tampon. The FDA states that the levels of dioxins in said products are so low as to be negligible and to not be concerned. You can make up your own mind. The other thing that's a byproduct of the cotton that's used in pads and tampons is that we live in a world of pesticides and chemicals that are sprayed on any and all things agriculture, right? So the cotton that is used in pads and tampons has what is called glyphosate in it, which is the thing that is compensating for the cotton being resistant to the pesticide Roundup. So because we're spraying many crops, but in this case cotton, with Roundup, a pesticide, the cotton plant then has glyphosate in it, which therefore is a toxic carcinogenic chemical that is in your pads and tampons. Those are just two. That doesn't account for odor neutralizers, dyes, other pesticides, and fragrances. So yeah, just again, it's a rabbit hole you can go down on your own time. So what are the alternatives, right? Like, how do we fix this, right? We talked about reusable pads. I think pretty much everyone has heard of a cup. If they haven't used one, you've at least heard of it. You can purchase, if you have the means to do so, organic alternatives. Luna pads. Cora is an amazing brand. Most of these companies are female-led. They are female-managed, and they are providing organic pads and tampons. They're still single-use. They're still disposable. But they are clearly the lesser of two evils. They tend to use less plastics, if any at all. And of course, the actual material that you're either sitting on with a pad or putting inside of you with a tampon is 100% plant-based, and organic. So if you have the means, do your due diligence. And of course, if you have the financial means, purchase those products over, the name brands that we tend to know and that get advertised, as they have been marketed to us, since the turn of, not the turn of the century, mid-century. And if you are looking to donate these kinds of products to underserved or homeless menstruators in your community, if you have the means, please try and go the organic way. But again, always remember, reusables are a little bit more difficult to work with if you're living on the street, as you may not have access to water to keep those reusables hygienic. Another amazing thing is Thinx, Thinx, Thinx. You can go to shethinks.com. It is the first company to create an underwear that you can free bleed into. They've changed my life. I love free bleeding. I do not like wearing tampons. I never have. If you're on an average flow day to a heavy flow day, you can rock a pair of Thinx for 6 to 8 hours and nothing. No spotting, no bleeding, no seepage, nothing. You're not going to stain anything. They are sent from heaven. Okay, like the best invention since Mr. Earl Cleveland gave us the tampon in 1933. If you are having a really heavy flow day, you may need to wear a pad with your things, or maybe you want to put a cup or a tampon in to supplement. But for the most part, if you have a couple of pairs of Thinx, and you can wash, obviously they're reusable, you wash them like you do any other underwear. If you have a couple of those in rotation, you may not find that you need to buy pads or tampons or liners at all. And the Forbes article pointed out that the average amount of money in the United Kingdom that's spent by a menstruator on pads and tampons is about 230 euros. So for us, well, let's just say it's about the same, like $200 a year minimum you're spending on menstrual hygiene products. Take $200 and buy yourself 8-10 pairs of Thinx, and just like a cup, like, you will see the economic benefits of this, you will see the comfort benefits of this, and the earth will obviously see the environmental impacts and benefits of this. The other thing that I wanted to mention is Flex cups. So if you're not familiar with Flex, it's a relatively new product. It's a little bit of a different animal, so it will take getting used to. They even have their own tutorials on how to insert and remove them. Flex is an interesting thing because it is plastic, however it is, and it is single use. I hope that they can design something that's reusable, but maybe you could reuse them once or twice, I don't know. But basically a flex is like a disc. It almost looks like a diaphragm with a little plastic bag, like kind of attached to it such that it catches the menses. But you insert it into your vagina in such a way that you're inserting it into the back and you kind of hook it under your pubic bone. So it sits much differently than a cup or a tampon would. So it does take getting used to. But the great thing about Flex is that it allows you to have sex on your period. You can actually have sex while a Flex cup is inside of you. This is not something I have personally tried yet, but I have spoken to many women who have and swear by it. Flex also claims that it helps eliminate cramps. I can't speak to that, but it is an option that is still more economical and more environmentally friendly than your typical pad, tampon, panty liner waist. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it, kids. I mean, we covered a lot of ground. At the end of the day, I think, really what it comes down to is, if you have the means financially to just make smarter decisions, vote with your money, purchase products that are organic, that are good for the environment, that are going to have less waste, that are run by female-led companies, or that are run by companies led by females, and that are going to not only do less harm to the environment, which is what this video is about, but it's also about doing less harm to you. These are things that you're putting inside of your body for 6.5 years of your life. You want to make sure you're choosing the best options for you and the best options for the future of planet Earth, because as much as it's probably all over and there's no saving it, what's the harm in trying then, right? So anyways, with that, please subscribe, please turn on the notification bell. More than that, please share this if it speaks to you in your communities, with your women, with your men, wherever you think that this information and the other videos in this playlist could do good. And please, 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 please comment below. I'd love to start a dialogue. And if you have questions about getting involved with Happy Period or how to start something in your own community and want to talk to me offline, just comment or DM me. And I would love to help. So again, thank you so much for watching and listening and sharing, and we'll see you on the other side. Cheers.